Today I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite accessories in the shop. It's the Bowclamp. The Bowclamp is simply a curved caul, and it comes in 2-foot lengths, 3-foot, and even 4-foot, and they're all really useful. You can see the first application quite simply here, doing a panel glue up. Now, a panel this size, I've got 3 boards. I would typically use 4 or 6 clamps if you have them. With the Bowclamps, you can simply get away with 2 clamps, just 1 at each end. Because the Bowclamp has that slight curve to it, a clamp at each end applies even pressure all the way across your panel. Gluing up panels is usually pretty straightforward, and that's because the panel pieces tend to have some width. So a clamp on one side gets the pressure of that clamp gets distributed across to the glue line on the other side, so you only need to space your clamps every so often. However, what about edge banding, where you're talking about very thin pieces being applied? Now if I slide my clamp up, I'm only going to get clamping pressure exactly where the clamp is, and I'd have to space my clamps continuously along this edge banding, which seems a little impractical. That is where the Bowclamp really shines. Go ahead and stick a Bowclamp between 1 clamp at each end, bring them right up, and now you have continuous pressure all the way along that edge banding. Let's check it out. Here you can see a 4-foot Bowclamp, and I've got the clamps tight so that it's tight here in the center. Obviously large gaps at the ends right now. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling in my clamps, and you can see that it's going to start applying pressure from the middle out towards the ends all the way continuously along that edge banding to pull it nice and tight into my workpiece. Here's a place I've used a Bowclamp to attach a 2-inch border onto a large dining room table. This table is over 10 feet long, and it simply took 3 Bowclamps and 6 clamps to attach the edge. How about face frames? Do you have this many clamps? I could have gotten away with just a few if I had used Bowclamps. Another application where the Bowclamp has really saved me is alignment and putting clamping pressure into the middle of my workbench. So here I've got a panel glue up where I've got the panel boards resting on some just straight pieces of wood, some straight cauls on top of my workbench. I'll go ahead and start applying pressure across the glue joint here using multiple clamps in this instance. Now what I want to do is pull down these work pieces onto these cauls. And I can't get a clamp in the center of my bench, and that's where the Bowclamp really shines. I can put it right on top of the caul that's underneath, and then put 1 clamp at either end of the Bowclamp attached to my workbench, cinch it tight, and get nice even pressure all the way across. I used this recently on a glue up where I needed to align a lot of pieces. A Bowclamp reached across my workbench to pull down that center caul for alignment. Here's the same idea using 3 Bowclamps to keep everything aligned in this countertop glue up. Now you could definitely make your own curved cauls, so why invest in Bowclamp cauls? Well, for one, they are CNC machined with a really nice, smooth, continuous curve that applies great clamping pressure all the way across. So you know you're getting that great clamping pressure all the way across, where shop-made ones, you've got to come up with that nice curve yourself to get continuous pressure. Also, they're made out of some great hard maple, really beefy, really well made, and I find that making an investment in something like this means I'm going to have them for many years, hang them on the shop wall right behind me, and use them all the time. One thing to consider when using the Bowclamps is not only will you pull the Bowclamp tight to your workpiece, you could pull your workpiece to the curve of the Bowclamp, which is not what you're looking for. Here I've got about a 2.5-inch wide piece of solid oak, and when I put a straight edge on it, there is a slight gap here at the end, about a 1/16 of an inch, but it is pretty flat across this 3-foot straight edge. But by the time I'm done pulling the clamps tight at each end, there is going to be a large gap here at the end where my straight edge is, showing me that this workpiece is getting pulled to the curve of the clamp. Just something to be aware of as you're working with Bowclamps. Of course, in those situations, one thing you can do is clamp your Bowclamp to your workpiece onto something that won't move, such as your workbench. So there are a few applications where I've used the Bowclamp in and around my shop, and I've found them invaluable. Although I'm starting to get a good collection of clamps hanging on my wall, the bow clamps are invaluable for those few applications where you need continuous pressure, or I need to reach into the middle of a work surface where I just can't get a clamp. I can put two clamps further apart, something like here, and get that pressure where I need it. So I would suggest that after you're starting your collection of clamps, check out the bow clamps as an additional accessory to work really well in your shop.